Mr. President, I rise today to voice my strong opposition to the Trump administration's latest move to override the will of Washington State's citizens, our fishing families, our small business owners, our environmentalists, and our outdoor enthusiasts by opening our coastal waters to harmful oil and gas drilling. The continental waters on the West Coast are one of our state's richest and most cherished national resources, sustaining communities along the Pacific Northwest for centuries and helping define our regional culture for generations. It would be hard to overstate just how important Washington's coastal waters are to our local way of life. Many of us count on our coasts for our food or our work, and Washington State coasts are home to numerous seafood and tourism-dependent communities, and they support a $50 billion maritime economy and nearly 200,000 maritime-related jobs, not to mention countless families and travelers who are seeking outdoor recreation who flock to our shores throughout the year to experience the natural beauty and sport of our iconic shorelines. To put it simply, Washingtonians don't take our healthy coasts for granted. We know keeping our shores pristine isn't just about leisure and scenic views. Preserving our coastal waters is a critical factor in promoting a healthy regional ecosystem and economy that supports vital jobs and industries, fish and wildlife, and public health opportunities that many of us, our families and our friends and our neighbors rely on. So, Mr. President, I too was deeply disappointed, but ultimately unsurprised, when Interior Secretary Zinke announced the department's plans to ignore the existing oil and gas leasing program that was just approved a few years ago and instead moved to draft and implement a new program that would allow offshore oil and gas drilling in nearly all of our nation's continental waters, including our coastal waters off Washington State. Despite decades of fact-finding and public input that already established the need to protect ecologically sensitive areas like our coasts. It appears, once again, President Trump and his cabinet have decided to prioritize big oil and the relentless pursuit of profit over the interest of Washington State families, and with virtually no regard to what their one-sided policy proposals may mean for our environment, for our public health, or for our economy. And Mr. President, to add insult to injury, I was even more appalled when it was reported just a few days later that Secretary Zinke was planning to remove Florida's waters from consideration after meeting with their governor and hearing their concerns. Now, Mr. President, I'll leave it to others who wonder what exactly persuaded Secretary Zinke to remove Florida from that list, but I can't say I was stunned when that courtesy was not extended to Washington State, even after our governor made the exact same request. So later, while I was on my way back home from the other Washington and concerned about the potentially damaging impacts of Secretary Zinke's decision on our Washington State's ecosystem, I decided to ask my followers on Twitter to join me in sending a message to the Interior Department and tweet photos of some of Washington State's many important and pristine coastal areas. And I just have to say, the response was overwhelming. Within hours, my timeline was filled with photos of beaches and coasts all along Washington State's shoreline, from Ruby Beach to Bellingham Bay to Olympic National Park to Orcas Island, photos of painted sunsets on the Puget Sound, the majestic calm of Cape Flattery, and of rainbows arching across the Belle Island shore. Photos of children running across the beaches of Kalaloch, and photos of fishermen unloading their haul in Salmon Bay. And I even received photos from other coastal areas in the Pacific Northwest, all from residents who want their pristine shores preserved and were eager to raise their voices to safeguard our coasts. I was inspired as I scrolled through this growing and beautiful collection of photos that illustrated the significance of our coasts, not just to our state's economy and environment, but to our shared culture and identity. Our shores are where we fish and swim and exercise and work, but also where our wildlife roams and our children play and where we make lasting memories with our loved ones. Mr. President, it is not too late for the Interior Department to reverse this misguided decision to expand offshore oil and gas drilling and instead focus on maintaining and strengthening existing regulations protecting this country's continental waters. I really hope Secretary Zinke and officials at the Interior Department finally hear loud and clear what Washingtonians have been saying for decades, that the extreme environmental and ecological dangers posed by offshore oil and gas drilling are too great a risk for Washington state families. And I hope they move quickly to reschedule the public meeting that they were supposed to hold yesterday in Tacoma so people from Washington can share their concerns with the department directly. Mr. President, I want to remind my colleagues and everyone in our country who cares about our environment, this fight is far from over. As we've learned over the last year, it is important we continue to make our voices heard again and again to ensure that this administration backs down from this reckless proposal and puts the interest of Washington state families first. As a voice for Washington state here in the United States Senate, I'm going to continue fighting against the Trump administration's efforts to leverage our environment to boost big oil's bottom line. And I know I will never stop standing with our families and our workers and our small businesses to protect our coasts today and for future generations. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.